This is the second video in a three-part series about car buying in 2023. To help me, I had a prior car salesman come in and discuss the car market as well as best car buying practices. Derrick's been on this channel last year where he broke down the 2022 car buying market and provided some tips and tricks for purchasing your next ride. In the first video, we looked at how the shift in the car market will affect your next vehicle purchase. And in this video, we're gonna look at practical strategies for how to purchase a vehicle this year. Let's get into it. What is, in your opinion, the 2023 go-to strategy for purchasing a vehicle?
Yeah. The first thing I would say is know the parameters of what you're looking for. Some people are really, really brand loyal.
Yeah.
It's becoming less and less that way. So it used to be that Honda drivers would only drive Hondas, Toyota drivers would only drive Toyotas, Ford drivers would only drive Fords. Now it's more, I want to drive this style of vehicle. I need a sedan that gets X miles per gallon. MPGs are a huge factor for people in the buying process right now. So one is pick the style of vehicle. Now there are some anomalies. Subaru drivers typically don't ever leave Subaru. Volkswagen drivers don't leave Volkswagen, typically speaking. You find those brands. Most other brands, though, are going to be pretty fluid, unless you're a truck driver. Truck drivers, we stick to the trucks. Like Ram, that's the truck you should buy. Personal opinion. Anyway, it is what it is. No, like truck drivers, they have their own, right? Ford, Chevy, and Ram are all going to fight with each other and say they're the best truck. Honestly, really good trucks across the board. I'll be totally honest. So the number one strategy for buying a vehicle right now, one, know the style of vehicle you want, and start looking at what the prices are doing on a regular basis across the board. So if you've got some time to play with, again, I will always tell people this. Try to never be in an emergency to buy a vehicle. Yeah. I mean, there's going to come a time when that happens. Yeah. But if at all possible, don't walk into a dealership and be like, hey, I don't have a car. I need one today.
Yeah, you certainly don't want to, if you are in that type of situation, you certainly don't want to show your cards.
Correct. If you are in an emergency situation where you don't have a vehicle, do your best not to throw that on the table. And I don't want you to lie. I'm not telling you to lie. I'm telling you, just don't volunteer information that isn't asked. The number one tool that a car dealer is going to use is the information you provide that they don't ask. When they're looking at your car, when you're trading your car in and they walk around your car, don't say anything. Because they're going to touch your car, and they're going to touch that spot where your son hit it with the bicycle, and they're not going to ask anything. They're going to touch it, and you're going to be like, oh, well, my son was riding his bike, and he scratched it, and we pulled it out, and all of a sudden, you've just lost $1,000, and you didn't even need to say a word. Because that ding doesn't cost them anything, but it cost you $1,000 because you talked. So.
Yeah. So, funny story about the whole purchasing a vehicle in an emergency situation. I remember from the last video that you said exactly that. If you can at all possible, and you know that a vehicle that you have is going to need to be replaced sometime soon, start looking, obviously start saving, and see if you can pick that up before something major happens and you're in an emergency situation. So we did purchase a truck, which I told you about. And we had a little bit of work done to it, had like rust proofing and whatnot taken care of. And then we brought it home on a Wednesday, and the following Monday, Bailey's car didn't start.
Yeah, that's a great story. Yeah. I love those stories.
Yeah. And I thought it was a battery. I simply don't have time to troubleshoot right now. So we had it towed to a local shop after I figured out that it wasn't a battery problem. And they were like, yeah, timing chain snapped, probably not worth it.
Nope.
And it was a 10-year-old Mitsubishi with almost 200,000 miles on it. And it was like, well, that couldn't have worked any better.
Yeah, so that definitely goes to show that you really need to kind of be watching what's happening.
Yeah.
If you're in a vehicle situation where your car is getting up there, you got to start evaluating how much money am I putting into it, What sounds is it making today that it didn't make last week? And just be watching, right? I mean, I'm not saying every 300,000 mile car needs to be replaced.
Yeah.
Not at all. My parents drove one for nearly 500,000 miles. It was fine.
Yeah. I've got a CRV that has 221,000 miles on it, and I'm planning on taking it past 300 at least.
Yeah. My parents had an Odyssey. Yeah. Their Odyssey, the original model of the Odyssey, they had 470 some thousand miles on it, and the engine still went. It just the body, the frame rusted out, and they couldn't go anywhere. Actually, the frame was fine. It was the gas tank fell off in the driveway.
Yeah.
Because the straps that held it on just rusted completely out, and there was nothing to weld them to.
Oh my gosh! All right, so what's the next step in your opinion? Next strategy?
So the next one is going to be. So you've got your car selection done. Mm-hmm. You've done a little bit of legwork about looking where prices have been in your area, saving some money up. Now you're really kind of into the whole before you ever set foot on the lot, before you set foot into the vehicle, right? Here's the thing: like once you're in the car, you start to own the car in your head. Mm-hmm. Once you start to sit in it, you drive it, you hear it. If you're a truck guy, you're going to hear it growl a little bit, and you're like, yeah, I really want this thing. So you got to, like, before you get in there, you got to have some other things done in your head, right? So you want to start to have some numbers compared across the board, right? So this is where I talk about different dealerships, different things. If you're a new car person, look at different dealerships. Mm-hmm. If you're a used car person, look at dealerships, but also look at private parties. There are some dangers in private party sales. It hasn't generally been looked at by a mechanic. Mm-hmm. If you're going to buy a used car, I would honestly, another step would be have a good mechanic that you trust. Mm-hmm. Someone that you use on a regular basis, build a relationship with them. Because if you're going to buy a used car, one of these, I wouldn't say second, but one of these later steps before you start really settling on a price is, I want to drive that car to my mechanic.
Yeah.
And I want my mechanic to take a look at it.
Yeah.
Because that's a really, really important thing. If the person you're buying a car from says, no, you cannot take it to the mechanic, leave. Mm-hmm. Leave. Fast. Don't even turn around. It's not a good idea. Yeah. So looking at cars, comparing models, start to compare prices, start to listen as they're talking about their car. If you're in a conversation, if you're emailing back and forth, see what kind of clues you get about whether or not there's some moving room in their price. A lot of times people will leave little breadcrumbs. Yeah. Right? If they're not going to move at all, a lot of times they'll say firm. Or they'll say, no haggling or whatever. If that's the case, the price is the price. Yeah,
and especially with places like CarMax. Yep. You're going there so that you don't have to haggle.
Correct.
So.
All of those mass companies that are nationwide, Carvana and all those, you're not going to haggle with those prices at all. They just are what they are. Mm-hmm. But in the private market, a lot of times if you like Facebook Marketplace or any of those, a lot of times there's some like OBOs in there,
or best offer.
Yeah, find your way to make your OBO your best offer. Like, figure out what that is, and don't be afraid to ask for less. And the other thing I will tell you is when you ask for a lower price, don't ask for a low enough number that you want to meet somewhere in the middle. Actually, I think you told me about the book, right? Yeah. The Art of Negotiating or whatever it is.
Never Split the Difference.
Never Split the Difference, right? And it talks about the art of negotiating. And the whole idea is, you're selling something for $100 and I offer you $50 in effort to kind of get in the 80 to 85 range. No, I just say like $82.75.
Very specific number.
Yeah, and that's the truth. And it works. One of the cars we bought, for my son, we put the offer in, and I said, "Look, here's the dollar," and it was something like, something ending in 89 cents or whatever.
Yeah,
and the
something
guy's like,
super random.
The guy's like, "That's really specific," and I said, "That's my dollar. That's what I'm paying. You don't have to sell it for that, but that's the only amount I'm paying." And he says, "I can't do that." And I will always say this to anybody buying a car anywhere: be willing to walk away.
Yeah.
If you're willing to walk away, if they have room to move, they'll move. And so when I did that, he said, "I can't do that." And I said, "No big deal, no harm, no foul. We'll part as friends, and maybe you'll get something else on your lot that starts at a lower price." And I got up and pushed my chair away from the desk, got up, shook his hand, and I started to walk away. He goes, hold on, let me talk to my manager. And as soon as that happened, I won the deal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing. Like, you make your offer and then just sit there and just shh. Don't say no word. You don't have to. Because the first person to talk after the deal is presented loses. Every time. So you present your offer. If you're buying, you present your offer and you just leave it. Let them talk. If they present you the numbers, you, and try to do your best not to say anything. Like, if you're at a dealership and they slide the numbers across in their fun little magical way, and a sale price and money down and this interest rate, this is your payment every month. If they do that, you just sit there and you go, oh, don't say anything. Just look at the numbers, look at them, look at the numbers, and just pause. And eventually, one of you is going to break the silence. And typically, the first person to break the silence is the one who's going to end up giving away in that deal.
Yeah. Well, this is going to be particularly interesting when we actually look at our truck deal in a different video. And if that video is already out, then I'll link it right here.
Yeah.
But it's gonna be interesting to look at that. Okay. Are there any other strategies that you think people should especially be considering as they go and purchase a vehicle?
I think one thing I will just caution people with right now is there's not a ton of wiggle room in the market.
Mm-hmm.
Primarily because a lot of the cars that are on the used car lot are still ones there that were bought at a really high dollar.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, go back and look at that, the Black Book graph that we've already seen. Okay, if it was purchased at the top and you're at the bottom, they can't drop that low, but otherwise they're going to lose their tails.
Mm-hmm.
They do have expenses. That's the other thing, right? If you're buying from a dealership, these people are trying to make their money. And so I always try to be a little bit conscientious of that and a little bit courteous of that fact, because I know what it's like to work on commission.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that they know that I'm not trying to take all of their commission. They're just not going to get the whole deal.
Yeah.
And I'm honest. Right out the gate, I let people know I am not paying that dollar amount.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't hide anything. I'm coming in there with a dollar in mind, and I let them know pretty much right out the gate, here's where I'm headed.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll get a feel right away whether or not that's something they're willing to do. But be realistic. I mean, a new car, your Civics, your Accords, and that class of vehicle, there's about $1,000 markup in those cars, and that's about it on a new vehicle. There's not a ton of new vehicle wiggle room in those. Now, there's some holdback and stuff that you can play with, and they don't touch that very often because that's how they cover their backside on other issues. But they have some play, but there's not a ton. There really isn't a ton.
Yeah, I remember us talking about that in the last video, and that was shocking to me that there is that little amount of margin on a new vehicle.
I mean, most of the cars that I sold, my commission was $100 because we had a flat.
Yeah.
And honestly, I didn't even make $100. It was just, they just had a minimum that they would have to pay you. Otherwise, nobody would make it.
Yeah.
I mean, so when I was selling cars, it was normal to sell maybe 18 to 20 cars a month.
Man, it's like nothing.
And if most of those car deals are $100 a month, you've got to find that one diamond in the rough vehicle. And typically it's a used car, because used cars have a higher markup in them because the market fluctuates so much, as you've seen, that we have a little bit more wiggle room in that area. But those were the ones we just waited for that one to hit, and we're like, okay, fine, I made my paycheck this month.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there were some months where it was bad.
Yeah,
it was bad. So
sounds like it.
But so be kind. I guess that's what I'm going to tell you.
Yeah.
Be kind when you're in there and you're talking to people in a dealership. Be kind. And this is their job. They're not trying to be jerks. I know that some have lied and they've done the thing, but really and truly, this is their job. Just like, you have a job, cashier at Kroger, or you're an engineer somewhere, or you're a trash collector somewhere, wherever you do. I mean, just be kind. Everybody's got a job, and they're just trying to do theirs.
Yeah. Okay. Quick interruption. If you're finding value in this, then hit the like button below, because this guy would really appreciate it. What's, in your opinion, the best way to not get shanked in a deal? That's just, obviously going into it, having done a ton of research into the type of vehicle or the brand that you want, where the market is, that's going to go a long ways to make sure that you're not going to be way overpaying for something that isn't worth it. Is there anything else that's simple?
So the other ones are try to remove emotion as much as you possibly can.
Be willing to walk away.
Yeah, and that's really important, honestly, because especially with new cars, and there are some used cars where this works, but especially with new cars, there's that new car smell. There's that nobody's ever sat on this seat before. There's all the things. The door doesn't creak when you open it.
Yeah.
The windows all go down the right way. Like all the things about a new car, you're sitting there going, man, this is really, really nice. So that's one. The other is if you're buying from a dealership, inevitably they're gonna try to add things onto the sale, and that's where they're typically going to try to get you on something. For instance, new cars. The paint protection thing.
Yeah, we'll get into that about our deal.
Yeah. So the paint protection, I never, ever, ever do the paint protection.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good. It works really well. I mean, we did it on a car at the dealership I worked at, and I sold some pretty high-end cars. And we treated half the hood with this stuff, and the other half we didn't. And we let it cure, and we took spray paint across the hood, and it just wiped right off the side that was treated.
Okay.
But the side that wasn't treated, it didn't come off until we used that same product and it buffed off.
Yeah.
We took a blowtorch to the car and it didn't touch the paint at all. I mean, it's good stuff. I would never pay $800 to $1,000 for that stuff.
Yeah.
Because I know it's not going to cost that much.
Yeah. Well, and that was another thing that I wanted to bring up is like in all of my research for purchasing this truck, one of the things that many of the experts suggest is like, okay, if you go in and they're trying to throw all these extra things on there, some of them are just ridiculous, like the nitrogen-filled tires. Our air is, the vast majority of our air is nitrogen anyways, so, it doesn't matter. But then you have other things like paint protection. You might have, leather protection, a bunch of different things that they could be tacking on, say like it's going to be $500 for this, it's going to be $1,000 for this. Well, if you say, okay, I don't want this, and they're like, well, we can't take it off because it's already been put on there, then you can say, okay, I'll pay you cost for it, which is something that I hadn't even really thought of until watching some of these videos. It's like, well, a lot of, like what you said, they're going to be upcharging it so that they can make a profit off of it because some vehicles don't have very much margin. So if you can make a whole lot more money off of the paint protection or whatever, then there it is.
So that's a game. We've already put this on the car. Technically, I have to go back and look at the laws again, but I am fairly certain that if it's been pre-applied to the car, it has to be written on a label on the vehicle.
Really?
And so the Monroney label, which is the window sticker that you're used to, it won't be on there, but there should be an addendum to that. It's just like putting running boards on a truck.
Yeah.
Or it's just like putting a spoiler on a car or window tint. So if you go to some of these car dealerships and you go in their showrooms, those are the cars they've done all the extra stuff to. And they'll have all that listed on there. And I don't...
window etching.
Yeah. And I don't know if... I don't know if paint treatment has to be listed on there, but I was under the impression that if it was something that was included as a mandatory part of the sale, like I can't take window tint off the car before I take it, I thought it had to be listed out on it. They tried to pull this on me when my son bought his truck. And we get the deal all done, and they're like, well, so now it's going to be $900 more because we have to paint, we've already pre-treated the paint. I'm like, you've pre-treated it with what product and where is it listed? Well, no, it's not really pre-treated. We have to do it. So you have to bring it back again for us to do it.
To protect your investment.
Yeah, and that's it, to protect your investment and all that. And I'm like, you know what? I'll buy my own wax and I'll take care of it myself. Thank you very much, right? But it doesn't work that way. Like, if they're going to treat the thing, chances are they're going to keep it there to treat it because it's got to be a perfectly spotless and clean vehicle for them to treat.
Mm-hmm.
So all the ones that I sold that had that paint protection, now I tell you this, and I tried to sell the paint protection, right? And typically the salesperson doesn't make the money on the paint protection. That's the finance manager makes the money on that kind of stuff on the back end of the deal. But they need to make their money too. Again, everybody's trying to make a paycheck here, right? And so when they do this, they typically will take it right away. Hey, we're going to paint treat this car, and then I'll pick it up tomorrow. And that's typically the way we did it because we wanted to know that it was perfectly detailed, had no dust on it when the treatment was applied so that the product works to its optimum standards.
Yeah.
If they let you take it and then come back again, man, they better detail the whole thing again before they put that paint treatment on there. But if you're not going to take care of your car, if you're not going to wash your car and all the things, yeah, you may want to end up putting the paint treatment on there. Try and negotiate the price of that down a little bit because there is margin in that. I guarantee that.
Yeah.
But if you're going to take care of your car, you can probably forego that.
Yeah.
I will tell you that I buy nothing off the menu in the finance department. Nothing. They bring it out and they go through all the options. You know, A is everything, and B is half the stuff, and C is a couple things, like the bare minimum. I always say I want option end where there's nothing.
Yeah.
And I let them know before I even walk into finance. I let my salesman know, your finance manager is going to try and sell me stuff. I am not going to buy any of it. This is the price I'm paying for the vehicle, and I'm not moving off of this.
Yeah.
And so that way I'm kind of setting them up for that right away. So.
Also, because if they're going to try, like if they're not willing to let go of the vehicle without making extra margin off of you, then you're saving you and them time.
Yeah.
By just laying it out on the table.
Yep.
Right from the start.
Yep.
So in part 3, we're going to finish up the best strategies for purchasing a car this year. When that video comes out, you can watch it right here. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, you can watch that right here. And if you'd like to see Derrick's reaction to my very first car deal ever, you can watch that here.